Okay, good morning, ladies and gentlemen. I'd like to call the meeting to order. I would like to begin by acknowledging that we're in Treaty 1 territory and the traditional homeland of the Métis Nation. My name is Ron Merritt. I'll be your chairperson this morning. Introducing the panel members, to my left, Mr. Maurice Etherian, and to his left, Brett McIntyre. And representing the city of Winnipeg is Mr. Merritt Frolick. And our recording secretary is Carla Belshaw. We'll be hearing applications for revision of the assessment roll in accordance with the Municipal Assessment Act. The matters for which revision is requested has been described in each application and will limit discussions to those matters. The statements that the applicants or the assessor make at the hearing are sworn testimony, and anybody speaking in these matters must be sworn in. Please be advised that comparison of assessments of properties are not considered evidence of market value by the Board of Revision. The board is appointed annually by City Council and is independent of it, along with the city administration. We make our decisions based on the evidence provided at the hearing and issue a written order that will be mailed to all parties as soon as possible. Please note that the board's decision in respect to the application may be appealed to the Manitoba Municipal Board if the matter pertains to assessed value or classification, or to Court of Queen's Bench if the matter pertains to application for exemptions from taxation. Should you wish to appeal, information on how to do so will be included in the board's order. In respects to the hearing, I will confirm the matters to be addressed with each applicant. Following the swearing in, we'll then have the assessor's testimony, followed by questions that the other applicant may have, and then it'll be the applicant's testimony followed by questions. Each party will have the opportunity to summarize if they wish. Once all evidence about the application has been brought forward, the applicant may leave. The process will repeat for each item on the docket this morning, and the session will close after the application has been heard and the board will deliberate in private and make its decisions. You will receive the order by registered mail as soon as possible. As all information, all public hearings are live stream recorded and will be part of the public record. We'll ask our secretary to swear in Mr. Frolick and Mr. Smith.
Yes, I'll swear.
Please state your name.
Merritt Frolick.
Do you swear the evidence you present today is the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God?
Yes, I do.
Thank you. Please state your name.
Trevor Smith.
Do you swear the evidence you present today is the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God?
I do.
Thank you.
Okay, gentlemen, you know the procedure, so we'll first hear Mr. Frolick and take us through the subject property at Springfield Road, number 1043.
Yep. File number is 18553. Roll number is 040030077700. For 2009, reference date April 1st, 2016, we have assessed value of $1,054,000. Property that we're looking at is vehicle service related. It was built in 1980. We have a wall height listed as 17 feet. A leasable area of 8,329 square feet and a land area of 25,389 square feet. Property owner has been compliant in completing their income and expense mailer information. It is owner occupied, but it's and they have listed their expenses here. But they do list a book rent, which I find interesting because if you look at the book rent that they're listing, it's $15.09, which is, I'm not too sure why they put that there, but it's significantly higher than the $10.12 that we're using. Got some pictures of the property on pages 3 of what it looks like. Mr. Smith has better pictures of the interior. And we do have the location listed at it, so it's on the corner of, just off of Sun Valley and Springfield Road to the northeast of the intersection. It has been impacted by the Chief Peguis highway, but you know, it's a high traffic area that serves the North Kelowna and Sun Valley community, so it is in a good location, even though it has been impacted by the new Chief Peguis transitway or the roadway. Page 5. What we have here is, we have it broken down into 3 different areas. They're all service kiosks. Total leasable area is 8,329 square feet, and the blended rate works out to $10.12. We have a 4% vacancy on the vehicle service garage. Expenses of 7%, shortfall of $450, comes up with net operating income of $73,769. We have an overall cap rate of 7%, and a lot of the agents look towards saying that our cap rates are too high. But if we actually look at the cap rate, and if we look at page 7 on our documentation, if you're looking at the midpoint for this, so a service garage could be defined as being industrial, or it could be defined as being retail. So it's a newer building, 1980. It's in a decent location, servicing the area. So if you look at the industrial aspects of it, the 20 percentiles at 6%, the 80th percentile is at 7.5%. We're using 7, so we're right at the midpoint for that. And if you're looking at the retail component of it, it's harder to say retail because it's more neighborhood. So it does seem to be a bit higher from a neighborhood perspective, with the 20th percentile at 7.5% and 7.75%, and a strip mall between 7 and 7.25. So in that regards, a strip mall component of it could be right because there are a group of vehicle service garages on that intersection there, because this is not the only one in isolation with regards to working on cars in the neighborhood. So what else is interesting about this is, so with the 7% cap rate, we come up with an assessed value of $1,054,000. However, so our net operating income is $73,769. However, if you take away the bank interest, and if you look at the net operating income on page 2, if you got $32,776 plus $48,000 for bank interest, it works out to $80,776. So $80,776 with our 7% cap rate is significantly higher than the $73,000 net income that we have listed here. And I realize it's a book rent, but this is what they put on their documentation for us. So if they take the time and effort to do this for us, there must be some reason where there must be some element of truth to the actual valuation process for this property or the net operating income. Page 6, we're looking at comparables. So what happens with the vehicle services garages? I've got some of them that are variety. Some on King Edward, which is 17,000 square feet. Another one on Port, which is 3,000. Another one on Vermilion, which is 5,000 square feet. So the ranges that we have here is from $8.15 to like $25. And the $25 is it's interesting because the $25 is what they report for the main floor mailer on that, for the main floor. But if you actually look at the entire square footage for that building, it works out to at 3,072, it works out to 1,354. And Nairn's a better location than the location that we have here. That's built in 86. What we have here is ours is built in 1980. So with that information with regards to market rents and comparables, I feel comfortable with the value of $1,054,000 that we have today. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Mr. Smith, no questions of the assessor?
Yes, just a couple. Start with regard to the cap rate, I'd actually be really pleased if your cap rates were on the high side, Mr. Kraft. Really, that would be great. Unfortunately, we don't see it that way. Moving back, I'll just confine my questions to a couple of points, I guess. So, looking at the rent comparables on page 6, the leasable square footage of these. So we have a building of 8,300 square feet roughly. The majority of these are considerably smaller than that. Is that correct?
Yep, that is correct.
Okay. So that would generally drive significantly higher rent per square foot, is that fair to say?
Yeah, but with the rental values, we're only off by 62 cents, so I don't
Then-
think that's the big deal.
Looking at 1790, or rather 1870 King Edward, it's also significantly larger. Would that be accurate, but closer in range? 815. These other locations, Nairn, Vermilion being, I don't know that there's an official name for it, but that Fermor Power Center on number 1 highway there, is that correct? Walmart, Canadian Tire, Co-op, Liquor Commission?
That is correct.
Okay. So there's supportive retail in many of these locations and considerably higher drive-by traffic, is that fair to say?
Yeah, that's also an $18 rent, which is significantly higher than the $10.12 that we have.
Right, but they would be retail locations with higher traffic?
Well, it's not a service garage or retail component.
That wasn't my question.
Okay, well, I'm just answering it.
And then moving on to cap rates. So I'm looking in here and I don't see CMBSR or auto sales anywhere in the cap rate chart. Is there anything specific to those, or are we comparing this to strip malls?
No, it's interesting, and like I had stated because it's in between being industrial, because it does more vehicle service work, and it also does retail, so it's a component of it. And so when I look at the industrial and the retail cap rates that's provided by Stevenson Advisors, they provide retail rates from industrial perspective from 7 to 7.5%, and retail from 5 to 6%. So with that information provided by Stevenson, I think our 7% cap rate's quite fair.
Okay, those are all of my questions, thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Therian?
Yeah, I was just looking at I think I got my answer, but it's on the cap rate. So I just want to clarify what you said. So we're looking at a single tenant A between 6 and 7.5. That's the 20th and 80th percentile. And then the neighborhood at 750 to 775. Now, it wasn't clear to me how much weight you were putting on the neighborhood, although you did say it was a mixture of both industrial and retail. What is being applied to because you mentioned there were a number of other vehicle garages in the area.
Yeah.
Do you know what was being used in those situations?
Well, there's a variety of stuff. There's some other auto body shops. There's also essentially mostly a vehicle service garage information there. There is a warehouse there, like a smaller warehouse that it switched over, but essentially it's a strip of vehicle service garages.
It's a strip there.
Yeah.
Okay, and do you know what the cap rates are being used for those? Would you
Those
know
are
that?
being model-driven cap rates
They're model-driven?
with regards to vehicle service garages as well. Because with the vehicle service garages, they're really hard to establish cap rates because a lot of them are owner-occupied or they're franchised-owned. So they're the Fountain Tires, they're Mr. Lube's, and they're usually owner-occupied. So they are a challenge for us to create cap rates for them. So our approach with regard to using retail and industrial with what we have here is, I think, a fair estimate.
Yeah, and back to the mailer, your logic is that they showed 125, where you're using 84, and your logic is the expense NOI is 32, you've added 48 to make it 80,
Yep.
but that's using the 125, so not too sure how to look at this.
Well, this is what they've provided us for. So taking out the interest income, they're saying that their net income, operating income for their property is $80,766. That's what they're saying, because we don't include interest with regards to calculation of net operating income. We're not using $80,866. We're using $73,769. But this is what they've provided us. I'm just making it to the board's, putting it to the board as information that they shared with us.
But this is owner occupied.
This is owner occupied unequivocally.
That's all, Mr. Chairman, thank you.
Thank you. Mr. McIntyre?
Mr. Chairman, Mr. Terrian asked my question.
Mr. Follick, did you get a chance to drive past it, or?
Yeah, I live in North Kildonan, so I'm very familiar with the area.
Okay, Mr. Smith, the floor is yours.
Okay, great, thank you. So I'll just make I guess a note or correction to start with here. I'll get you to flip to my addenda, the first page in the addenda, which is the income and expense form filed by the owner of the property. It was under discussion there. So,
What page is it on?
Yeah, let me find it,
It's
please.
at the back, I would imagine. Yes.
unfortunately, I don't have that
Okay.
numbered, but it's the very first page in the addenda,
Yep.
income and
Very
expense form.
I don't have it yet.
Keep going, keep going, keep going. There.
There you go.
Okay, there you go.
Okay. So, as noted, the property is owner occupied, so it is a non-arm's length lease for all of the properties, which are owned by the same individual that owns the properties. He owns and runs them. He's on site every day. It's non-arm's length. I'm not sure why we're talking about the rent that he pays to himself for the property that he owns. It's irrelevant what that number is. There should be no weight put on that whatsoever, so it's really not under discussion. Moving on from that, very back page of the brief. You can see the decision with regard to the same property in the last cycle, was reduced from $869,000 to $818,000, based on a capitalization rate of 8.5%. We are not seeking 8.5% in this round. We have adjusted that to 8% in our valuation of the property. And we'll get to the detail on capitalization rate, but to start with, I would point out that automotive properties in better locations on Regent Avenue, sales and collision centers in that neighborhood, had a 7.5% cap rate applied to them by the city of Winnipeg in their valuations. We had appeals on those go forward with 8% cap rates being decided upon those. So we're looking at Regent Avenue, more of a retail location, more of a retail operation in frontline automotive sales being decided at 8%. So that is just a bit of background for you. So moving forward, we'll start at the beginning here rather quickly. The property 1043 Springfield, we're looking at a 22.4% increase to the city of Winnipeg's assessment number of $1,054,000. The property itself is largely service garage with an element of automotive sales. If you look at the land to plan area ratio at the bottom of my chart on page number 3, you can see that it's really low for an automotive sales location at just over 3 to 1. They have very little display area for their sales component. Moving on from there on page 4, you can see the interior and exterior photos of it. It's a service garage. It's pretty straightforward. It's not new. It has obviously the wear associated with the age, but it's pretty standard. I would say it's an average condition for property of this type of that age. The description of it is on page 9, and we can move on to the site and the location. So looking at the site, we are located on Springfield Road west of Lagimodier. Springfield Road on this section is a dead end and ends in a cul-de-sac, as it is cut off by Chief Peguis Trail, which is actually a very important part of our valuation here today. The site has relatively low visibility from Lagimodier Boulevard, so it's not comparable to a location such as being on Nairn or Portage Avenue or anything of that nature. Page number 11 gives you some aerials of it. The top one gives you the bigger picture. Obviously, Chief Peguis was built, and Springfield Road, which we used to run all the way through, was cut off. So the traffic that was generated by that would pass by this location was cut off. So essentially you now have a cul-de-sac that people have to specifically drive to in order to get to these few businesses that are located on there. There's a couple of other automotive businesses, and then I think it's Star Building that's on the south side of the road there with a lot of exterior storage on their yard. The impact of Chief Peguis being built there on the business has been relatively significant. They don't get that same visibility, so they're not necessarily top of mind for people for repair, and it's also more challenging certainly for some people to get to with the division of former Springfield there. So the site is disadvantaged in that aspect. We can move on to the valuation. And page number 14, looking at leases, as we have an owner-occupied building, we have to compare it to market. So that's what we've done here. We're looking at all automotive properties here. The 3570 Portage Avenue is a Lloyd Collision Center at $10 a square foot. Roughly the same size at 9,300 square feet. In 2014 for 5-year term, so very standard. Obviously Portage Avenue having greater visibility. The Dugald property, number 2, is a repair place. $8 a square foot in 2014, 8,400 square feet. Certainly more comparable to the subject property in terms of location. Then we have a larger one on Inkster, which is a heavy truck collision center, a little more heavier usage than the subject property. That was in 2011. Then we have Fountain Tire at 140 Warman, high visibility from Lagimodier, direct access from the side road of Warman. 9,500 square feet, 2013 lease at $10 a square foot. We can go through the remainder of them if you wish, but I guess the next most important one would be number 5, which is 2014 lease at $750 for a Sturgeon Tire on Notre Dame. So if you frame the subject property in relation to these, it is located on a dead-end street that you have to directly go there for. Low visibility from that, a lot lower traffic flow, etc. So we have assigned a rental rate of $9.50 a square foot for the subject based on the market. Our other our other stats for the property remain the same as the cities. If you look at the actual shortfall allowance, they would be somewhat higher than the city, but it's not an important detail. They would come in at $5.40 a square foot based on their actual expenses. So summarizing this, using the market rent of $950, we come to an NOI of $68,033. Moving on to cap rates, we don't have any direct sales of commercial vehicle service garages, unfortunately. we have provided some capitalization rates on industrial properties, as it is more of an industrial operation than it is a retail operation. Certainly the service garage is much greater importance than the sales component. So you can see our cap rates there range between 7.6 and 9.4% for relatively standard investment properties for industrial. But moving beyond that, on page 20, again, we have a property on a dead-end street, poor visibility. This would limit tenant interest in the property, certainly if it wasn't owner-occupied, and would restrict the rental rate that one could achieve on it. And obviously, that would limit what one would be willing to pay for it as a cap rate as well. Looking at the special use nature of automotive properties, looking at the fact that we have Board of Division decisions at 8% on Regent on automotive properties, city using 7.5% in that same location. We believe that an 8% cap rate is certainly fair and in line with our other decisions at the board in this cycle. So capping our income at 8% gives us a final market value of $850,000. And that's my presentation. Thank you.
I thank you, Mr. Smith. Mr. Frolick, questions?
Yeah, for sure. Just quickly, as a person who's a motor vehicle service garage, is that an impulse decision, or is that decision with regards to automotive shops more based on reputation and work being done?
It would be, it's not an impulse decision, but it would be based on both reputation and accessibility.
Okay. And so the location of this service garage would not be an impulse decision, then, correct?
The location
Of going to this dealership, of going to this vehicle service garage would not be.
It wouldn't be an impulse decision to get your car serviced there, but certainly if it's more convenient for you to go to other locations, you would do that.
So would people?
And if I were to be choosing to start one up, I wouldn't necessarily choose to start one on a dead-end street versus a high-traffic location.
But it's a high-traffic location for that quadrant of the city.
Not on a dead-end street, it's not.
It's easy access from Serrata to Rodier. Okay, we'll agree to disagree. Rents. What's the reference year for the market rents that we're using for this assessment period?
April 1st, 2016 is
Okay.
the valuation date
And-
of the 2019
And
assessment.
your most recent rent that you've provided here is 2014, is that not correct?
That is correct, yes.
And do you have any updated lease information for your most recent rent at 3570 Portage Avenue?
I think we've gone through this in other hearings prior to this. and
Which
it
is why
was-
I'm wondering, I have to ask this question over and over again.
It
Is it not
was-
$13 as of,
No.
I got two mailers here showing the rent being
Yes.
$13.
Well, again, Mr. Froelich, we've gone through this numerous times, and it is in fact $10 when you go through the.
Do you have any evidence to
detail.
support that?
I guess I felt that having done it numerous times before this panel on the innumerable automotive properties that I've represented, that we would not need to do it yet again in
Okay.
a
Well,
groundhog fashion.
but if you don't have actually any evidence to support that, if the board wants to look at the 2014 mailer and the 2016 mailer, I have that for
Nope.
review,
Nope.
because this is your most recent rent. Okay, let's look at another rent here. Your comparable number 8, 2007. That's essentially 9 years away from the reference date. You have a more recent rent for this property.
So, if I had the more recent rent for the property, I would present it. The point in presenting the leases that are there is to provide automotive, both automotive repair centers and any automotive-related repair properties and the leases that we had access to. Now, we place really no reliance on the older information that's indicated there. It's simply to show the progression of rents over time.
But wouldn't your rents that you've come here to come up with your $9.50 average be impacted by your artificially low rents that
I
you're
don't
providing?
have a $9.50 average. I've
Well, you're
looked at-
using a rental rent of $9.50. And I have one rent here for $10, which is 13, and your reported rent of $11.43, which is reported on the income expense mailer for $15.98.
Do we have a question here? I'd like to answer.
Yeah, I'm asking you why you're using market rents that are 9 years away from the reference period.
I'm not actually using those, nor am I using an average of $9.50 to determine my rental rate that's applied to the subject property. We went through my determination of how we arrived at the net rental rate, and as indicated, 3570 Portage Avenue, we've gone through that numerous times, and we don't have a $13 a square foot rent at that property for that time frame. So there is no reliance that's being placed on these older sales, and I thank you not to characterize it as using an average to come up to $9.50 a square foot.
I don't
These are
understand.
not words that came out of my mouth.
I don't understand that train of thought, but that's okay. So, vacancy. So, you're using an industrial cap rate for your cap rate study, but for your vacancy, you're using the 5%, well, we have 4%, well, it's only 1%, and I understand that. But your industrial vacancy rate is under 2.7 and 3.1%, and yet you're using industrialized cap rates. So can you explain to me why there's different methodologies for using a higher vacancy rate on one aspect of your brief?
Well, you're
and
only
then-
talking about 1%, so.
Yeah, I understand that, but it's about credibility.
Okay.
It's just like the market rents.
It
Well,
is in fact about credibility, so now that you brought it up, let's address it. Looking at the top of page number 15, we have a chart regarding vacancy for industrial properties in the city of Winnipeg. Now, if you look at that carefully, you can see there's three different line items there. We have overall industrial vacancy, which would take into account all industrial properties, including owner-occupied, in which we have point in time 3.1% vacancy at the end of 2015 and 2.7 for the 5-year average. Now, looking at the industrial sphere as a whole, obviously you're going to have a lot more owner-occupied properties, which will give you a lower industrial vacancy. Now, looking at it at the other two lines, investment vacancy for industrial, we have point in time 7.3% vacancy and 5-year average of 6.8%. Single tenant industrial investment vacancy, we have 7.4% and a 5-year average of 6.5%. So the 5% vacancy rate that I've assigned to the property is certainly reflective of the market as indicated.
So, but are these just numbers, or where's your analysis for this? Because it's like, if you're including downtown office space in your, it's so hard, because anyone can put numbers.
You know what?
It's-
We're talking about 1%, which
Okay.
is, maybe $600 or something
Okay.
like that. To translate that into value,
Okay.
I don't think it's worthwhile going there.
Okay, fair enough. I'll make, okay, I have one other question
And,
here.
and to your point, which you just said, and I'm not going to belabor it, but it indicates what my source is right there, and that we're dealing with industrial, not downtown office.
So, okay, with that follow-up question, you've then used industrial cap rates, not vehicle service garage cap rates, which are significantly higher. Your smallest one is 4 times the size of the subject property. So if you're looking at the smallest one that you have is 36,725, which is single tenant with a 9.4% cap rate. Yet your industrial cap rate that's provided on Stevenson on our brief is between 7 and 7.5%. So can you explain to me why there's such a difference in capitalization rates for what you've provided here on page 17 under your brief and what we've used for capitalization rates that's provided by Stevenson between 7.75%? Because that's a pretty significant difference.
Certainly, I didn't provide that, you did, and I'm happy to comment on it if I need to comment on it, if the panel wishes me to.
I don't think it's worthwhile going there.
Okay.
Okay, so,
No other questions?
okay. Mr. Therian?
Yeah, how long have these people been in business? Because what I'm trying to find out is, because of the location and how you access the place.
Yeah.
Can you tell me how long they've been in business?
Yes, I can't specifically tell you how long, but he's been there for some time, and he was there prior to Chief Peguis being put through, and he's seen a drop in his business since that time frame. And I can tell you that every time he calls me, he's threatening to shut his place down and move it outside of the city. That's somewhat
But they've
beside
been
the
there
point, but
for a long time.
he's been there for some time.
Yeah. I don't know how much weight we can place on this, but but it's part of your evidence on page 16. You're showing that the city, at the last cycle, used 970. You're using 950 today, and obviously, I don't know what your request was at the time, but it's part of your evidence. So
Right.
you're asking for a lower rate than what the city was using last time.
I am, and again, that's based on the market evidence. We were lower than what we were asking for this time, and I see that, obviously things adjust over time, so we're at a $9.50 rental rate this time.
So it's not an average, that 950?
It's not
Because
an
there's
average.
So you've just picked that figure, you figure that's the right amount based on your evidence?
That's correct. It's a professional judgment, looking at the evidence that we have available in relation to where this property is, the type of property, the desirability of it. The rent that you would pay in this location would be lower than you would pay on a Portage Avenue or another retail high-traffic thoroughfare.
And on your cap rates, a little bit along the same line as the assessor, I was looking at this, and we've got an 8,300-foot building, and your cap rates on page 17 are on buildings going between 36,000 and 77,000. So how much weight should we place on that evidence?
Well, so that's the challenging aspect in valuing these vehicle service garages, is that by and large, a lot of them are owner occupied, right? So you don't have in place income that when the properties they're not sold as investment properties. Somebody buys them to take over the business essentially. So there's no direct cap rates out there for us to point to say that these are what investors are willing to pay for this type of real estate. So you need to frame it as best you can for what investors are willing to pay for a similar usage property, which would be industrial being the closest. So we've provided cap rates on true investment sales for industrial properties. Are they vehicle service garages? No. Are they necessarily the same size? No, but it does give you an indication of what cap rate investors are willing to attribute to true investment industrial properties.
In different parts of the city as well.
Yes,
They're
different parts
not
of the city.
close. None of them are close.
I would love to show you 3 properties side by side next to the subject or in close proximity, but I just don't have them. But it does give you the mindset and the investment parameters of what people are paying in the marketplace.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. Mr. McIntyre?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Smith, on page 14, you had referred to comparable number 2 as a good comparable based on the square footage of the building.
The square footage is similar, yes.
Do you know the age of the building, because it's missing in the,
Unfortunately, I did not have the age of that particular building. I apologize for that.
and the other question related to that, is this a vehicle service garage or just a sales facility?
That particular one?
Yes.
It's got several different uses in it. I believe there's a Subway that's located there as well, but it's dominantly industrial.
It's mostly a warehouse.
So there's no vehicle servicing going on?
Oh, there is.
Oh,
But it's a complex, like there's 3 or 4 different, I looked at the rent roll.
okay, thank you. And the second question is, you had made reference in your brief on page 16, you had supplied some information on the 2016 City of Winnipeg information. Do you know when Springfield Road was closed?
The specific date?
Right.
I did not bring that with me today, but we're going back. I don't want to give a number because it won't necessarily be accurate, but I'd say it's a minimum of 5 years.
Okay, no, that's fine, thank you. No more questions, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. Mr. Smith, when you develop cap rates,
Yes.
you normally look for good comparables, etc. But I noticed, I guess, when you're using your cap rate, all the sales are old. So nothing more current?
Well, we have, and I take your point, but we have 3 from 2014. So that's, within, certainly within the typical 2-year span of the valuation date. We didn't have really strong comparables that were in that 15, early 16 timeframe to provide. But another important aspect of the capitalization rate was in comparison to other automotive properties in the market and how they were being valued. So our decisions on on automotive properties on Regent were at 8%, and indeed the city was using 7.5% for those automotive properties on Regent, certainly a better location than the subject property.
So under page 20, I see that you've done a 16 assessment, whereas you're using the NOI of the city, okay, and you're capping it at 8%, okay. So that was the original last year. So if we look at the 8.5 cap rate and apply the city's NOI, it gives you what they came down to of 818.
That was the decision last time, yes. I provided it
So-
for reference.
So, so when I look at what they did the last time, and I really shouldn't, but you've gone down to a lower cap rate from 8.5 to 8. So how can you sort of justify the 8?
Well, we have seen a trend downwards in capitalization rates, certainly in the industrial market in that time frame. Well, generally in most of the categories. So the evidence that we see would point to a slightly lower cap rate than the 8.5% that we used in the last cycle.
Okay, I thank you, Mr. Smith. Summation, either party?
Yeah, just quickly, couple things to consider when looking at market valuation. Looking at market rents, the market rent that we use, there's not a huge difference in market rents. But when we look at the information provided by the applicant, there's some issues with regards to credibility with regards to more recent rents. Second issue with regards to referencing the cap rate issue. It's my belief that Mr. Smith does not have a lot of single vehicle service garages that are only vehicle service garages on Regent where he's referencing that 8%. Those 8% cap rates that he's referencing include higher risk because they are car dealerships. And so I'm pretty confident that all the 8% that Mr. Smith is referencing is from the car dealership aspect of it, not from the single independent vehicle service garages, which is why our assessed value of $1,054,000 is a fair value. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Smith?
So I guess in summation, I just perhaps like to address those remarks with regard to the city indicating credibility issues. That's certainly an interesting point. The one particular rental comparable that they continue to dispute has been proven beyond doubt in the past, and yet it continues to come forward. I would call attention of the board to that. It appears to be a bit of a credibility issue, and generally one should understand the direction of capitalization rates as well. Those are my comments. Thank you.
Thank you. I think that concludes your part, Mr. Smith.
Thank you.
Thank you for coming, and results very soon. Mr. Newman and Mr. Becker, who's going to be coming first? Okay.
Together.
Oh, together?
We'll go PCAPR and Henlow.
Okay.
Which
Good.
one?
Henlow Bay, 165, so we'll have Mr. Newman sworn in and Mr. Becker sworn in.
Mr. Newman is going to speak on the classification.
Oh, right, okay. We'll just inform Mark that you're his liability, eh?
Yes.
Do you have a roll in, Chair? Please state your name. Do you swear the event you present today is the truth and nothing but the truth? Do you swear the evidence you'll present today is the truth and the truth and nothing but the truth, so help you God? Thank you.
Okay. So we'll go to 165 Henlow Bay, and Mr. Newman, if you're going to talk about liability, you may proceed.
So what we've done typically in the past is that someone, sometimes the assessors, sometimes Mr. Becker or whoever's in his position today, makes a bit of a presentation to explain the nature of the building, its physical aspects and the use, and then I build on that in terms of a submission with respect to the liability and exemption issue.
Okay?
So perhaps Mr. Becker can start and then I'll build on it.
If I could ask the board to turn to our presentation. On page 2, there is just basically a street photo of the subject property. The property has a gross floor area of 16,640 square feet with a leasable area of 16,540 square feet. It's part 1 story and part 2 story. On page 3, there's an overhead of the subject property. As you can see at the top of the page where the indicator is there, that's a 2-story. It's got office on the street side, and then it's warehousing on the right-hand side of the property there. And then in the bottom part, you can see it's a large parking area for school buses, and the white little building that you see there, that's a storage building for lawnmowers, etc. It's very limited lighting, no heat. I'll just go briefly through the description. The subject property, subject building is an industrial warehouse building located at 165 Henlow. The property is best described as an office warehouse used as a carpentry and transportation shop and was constructed in 1989. The reported wall height is 18 feet. The office leasable area is 5,900 square feet, and the warehouse space is 10,640 square feet. The subject site is rectangular with a total site size, according to the City of Winnipeg Property and Taxation Department records, of approximately 3.4 acres and is zoned M2 industrial. Now, if I could ask the board to turn to page 13. This is a main floor plan, and it shows the layout on the main floor. As you can see on the left side there, that's the two-story office portion. And then on the right side, the larger area is the warehouse section. And you can see there at the back, it's carpentry shop, carpentry finishing, there's a spray room. To the right, there's cartage, storehouse, and warehouse. And then right beside the office area at the front is a small transportation shop. The carpentry shops and finishing there are used to build tables, etc., repair desks, etc., for the schools in the Pembina Trails Division. And the cartage storage warehouse, they have all kinds of tables, stages, chairs, etc., that are used as the schools need them, if they're putting on a play or something in the gymnasium. All these stuff can be stored here, and it can be taken from there to the school. Transportation shop is basically one open area with 18-foot ceiling height, and you have a portable lift in there, no pits, etc. I have photos of it, but it's in my rebuttal. I don't know if the board wants to see them.
Can I see them, Doctor?
Yeah,
See some of
I
them?
can-
Because like,
Yep.
it's gonna be at the municipal board anyway, so
Okay, well, we can have a brief look at it.
Yeah, how do you know?
let's,
How
well,
do you know that?
We have a very
well, the
competent
point
board.
is, on my brief, it says to confirm the assessment and classification liability pending the 2016 municipal board appeal, so it's very front and center. I'm not hiding anything.
I think the evidence in front of the board will show that it should.
Well, and the thing is, Mr. Becker, if you don't mind me speaking, after looking at the field permits for this, I don't dispute the fact, and Doug and I talked about this beforehand. It is a warehouse, it's a storage area, like, it's not a vehicle service garage. I fully acknowledge that. But the point is, that because of the pending municipal board, I'm towing the party line.
Okay. Well, on page 8 of the rebuttal, it starts the photos of the subject property. And you can see on the left there, that's a welding area, a repair shop, a small little area in there. And then on the right-hand side, that's a picture of the carpentry shop, and that would be on the left-hand side of the floor plans that I showed you. And then you go to the next section. This is the warehouse area. You can see they store tables, chairs, etc. Both pictures, they show it's used for storage for the school, and it's built like a typical steel frame warehouse. And the transportation shop, there's no pits, etc. There's one portable lift, and that's all it is, and it's to work on the school buses. So that, in a nutshell, is basically the description of the physical assets of the property. Now, the rest is up to my further friend.
So, Mr. McIntyre, you're the new kid on the block in terms of these issues. The two grizzled veterans beside you have heard this before. The issue is whether this property is entitled to an exemption in accordance with the provisions of the legislation. And so I've given you a brief that speaks to that issue, and I'm going to address that. Mr. Betker has gone through a description of the use, and I think it's clear that everything that goes on in this facility is tied to what's going on in the schools. This is not an administrative building for the school division at large. The superintendent, the treasurer, none of these people are housed in this building. The carpentry shop is all about making and or repairing desks and tables that are used in the school. The storage area is all about the storage of stages that are used in school auditoriums. It's about chairs, it's about those things that go back and forth between the schools. When I was a young lad, a lot of that stuff used to get stored under stages, and it would get rolled out on trolleys. They've now centralized a lot of these things. The transportation shop, as you can see from the photos, that's all about the maintenance of the school buses. And of course, the school buses are used for one single purpose, the transportation of students in the context of the operation of the school. So why do I tell you all of that? I've given you a separate brief, and so what I'd like to do now is work through that. And if we can turn to the first page of that. In the lower half of the page, you see the heading legislation. And Section 22 of the Municipal Act indicates that real property is exempt from taxation levied by a municipality where, and if we go to the top of page 2, the property is used for a public school within the meaning of the Public Schools Act. Okay, so what does the Public Schools Act say? That's the next section on page 2. The Public Schools Act says that a school building includes, notice the word includes. When you see the word includes, that's an expansive word. It means they're not intending to name every example, but they're going to name some examples. It includes the buildings required or used in a school division or school district for the imparting of instruction. Nobody's being instructed here, I acknowledge that. But, as I've bolded and underlined, or for offices or other public school purposes. So clearly you have offices in this building to some extent, but you also have as well the other public school purposes which go on in this building, which include the manufacture and repair of desks and chairs used in the schools, the storage of equipment and staging and chairs used in the schools, the transportation shop, which repairs the buses used for public school purposes. That's what buses are used for, public school purposes. And so I say to you simply that based on that definition, this building is a school building within the definition of the Public Schools Act. And if you then go on, now I get to explain the legislation in French. And in Manitoba, legislation in its French version and in its English version is of equal application and it's equally authoritative. The reason that is important is because sometimes the language can be a little bit different between the English version and the French version. And this is a case where the language is a little bit different. And at the lower portion of page 2 of my material, you see my reference to the decision of the Winnipeg School Division. That's the Manitoba Court of Appeal. So the Manitoba Court of Appeal has spoken in the context of a school tax exemption case. Different circumstances, so I'm not trying to tell you it was the same circumstance. But beginning at the bottom of page 2 of my brief is the quote from paragraph 26 of the decision, in which the court said, the English version indicates that real property is tax exempt where it is used for a public school within the meaning of the Public Schools Act. So let's stop there. Remember, I've just taken you through the definition of school building in the Public Schools Act, which says that a school building includes buildings used for imparting instruction, but it says or, and it says or used for offices or other public school purposes. And so I can say to you, let's stop right there. We fall within the definition as mandated by the Court of Appeal, and we don't have to think about anything more. But I'm not going to stop there. Now I'm going to go on and discuss with you the French version. And so the Court of Appeal, continuing on, says, the French version indicates that real property is tax exempt, and now I am at the top of page 3. Real property is tax exempt where it is used for the needs of a public school. So there is a difference in the interpretation, and so the Court of Appeal has said that it is equally authoritative, and so the question becomes, looking at it from the perspective of the French version, is this building used for the needs of a public school? And I say to you that the offices that look after the school buses, the maintenance of the school buses, the manufacture and repair of desks and chairs, the storage of stages and chairs, and that type of thing, all of those things are only used for one purpose, the needs of a public school. And so I say to you, based on that, the requirements of the exemption are met as well. Let me take you then, let me jump you ahead to page 6 of the material. And in the middle of the page, I have the heading Conclusion. And I give you excerpts from the Interpretation Act. So the Interpretation Act says, in section 6 and 7, every act must be interpreted as being remedial and give it a fair, large, and liberal interpretation that best ensures the attainment of its objects. And section 7 says the English and French versions of acts and regulations are equally authoritative, which I told you earlier. Then at the bottom of that page, I reference recent decisions of this board, and I make reference to the 4 most recent decisions. And at the time I wrote that, that was true. There has since been one more recent decision in a property known as 3350 Wilkes, and I want to be upfront with this with the panel. I especially want to do that because Mr. Therian was a member of that panel. And that panel, in their wisdom, determined that they would not grant an exemption in respect of 3350 Wilkes. So I am telling you that, even though I am at the same time telling you and giving you, at tab 4 of my materials, 4 of what I will now call the more recent decisions, 4 out of the 5 last decisions, where different panel members, and if you turn those pages, you'll see that panels made up of, on January 29, Callison, Goldack, and McFadden, 1395 Spruce, a very similar building in terms of what's going on. Callison, Goldack, and McFadden, again on January 29, 1397 Spruce. A couple of guys named Merritt and Therian, and then Ms. Linkletter on February 6, in respect of 901 Maginot, also a similar building, and then a different panel, Laurendo, Nesbitt, and Stevens, also on February 6th, a morning and an afternoon that day, in respect of 150 Moray Street in the St. James School Division, granting exemptions in respect of those properties. So, let's understand the practicality of what happens here. So you have the City of Winnipeg levying taxes on this property. Those taxes, of course, include the municipal tax and the school tax. And the city turns around and remits the school tax to the school division. And so in the sense of that portion of the tax bill, that money just runs around the table, if I can use that expression. The school division pays it and the city gives it back. For the municipal tax, of course, if the property is determined to be exempt, then that money is never collected by the city and never paid by the school division. We have the unusual circumstance, of course, where the school division is a taxing authority in its own right. And the city just happens to be the collector of those taxes. So to the extent that the school division has to pay taxes, it becomes part of their budget, of course. Their mill rate goes up. And so what the city's collecting on their behalf simply goes up. To me, it seems like a pretty foolish exercise to have all that money running around the table and going through that administrative process and the process we're now going through. So these 4 decisions, in fairness as well, the city has challenged the determination of the exemption, not to the municipal board, because that's not where a challenge of that type goes. The challenge of that type goes to the Court of Queen's Bench, and these matters are sitting there right now. And I can tell you I am in conversation with the city legal department right now about bringing forward some test cases to try and get some of these issues determined. But having said all of that, I think from my perspective, it is quite clear that the language of the legislation, the Public Schools Act definition, which says that school building includes offices or buildings used for other public school purposes. Clearly, these buildings are used for the purposes of a public school. The French version is broader, as I've said to you. It indicates that the property is tax exempt where it is used for the needs of a public school. And I submit to you that clearly this property meets the needs of a public school. It's not doing anything else but addressing the needs of a public school. And on that basis, I'm asking you to revise the classification and grant the exemption. And subject to your questions, that's my submission.
Thank you, Mr. Newman. Mr. Follick?
I have no questions. This is gonna be done at another matter. I do have some rebuttal information though to provide.
Well, just, Mr. Therrien?
Well, yeah, I've asked them questions at previous boards, but it's a novel hearing here, I guess, so we
Ask me.
gotta ask you.
I
So,
have one.
yeah, I had one on the French aspect of it, because I wanted to see how the translation had been done from the French to the English.
Tab 1,
Tab one?
page, page 8 at the top, in the right-hand column,
Tab one, page 8.
subparagraph D.
Oh, see, the numbers up the bottom there. Okay. So it's at the top there.
Yes, subparagraph D on the right-hand side.
Yeah, so elles sont utilisées pour les besoins d'une école publique. So the word besoin is the needs one that you're saying was not in the English version?
That's correct.
Okay. I've got another question as well here. So I'm trying to, I want to make sure I follow the school building, what follows and the, but there, apparently there is a list of public schools that is put out by the, I don't know if it's the Department of Education, but are you familiar with that list? Apparently it lists what is a public school.
I'm not familiar with that list per se, but I don't doubt for a moment that every public school, and by that I mean buildings that are used for the instruction of students, is reflected on a list somewhere, because of course they need to be properly, I'm going to use the word licensed.
So would this building on Henlow be listed as far as, I mean, we're guessing here, I guess, but is it your opinion that this would be listed under the public schools definition? Because there would be the main school
Yes.
and then these adjacent buildings? Do you think they would be identified in that list?
And we're guessing, as you said.
Yeah,
So-
it's
so
because
I-
I've heard of that, so I'm trying to get a handle on
And I
it.
want to preface my answer in that way. But and sometimes these additional buildings are immediately adjacent, they're on the same land site.
Yeah.
And for example, if you think about Tech Voc, there is a very large campus that makes up the Tech Voc area of land, some of it which fronts on, essentially on Notre Dame. But there's a building there that is 1180 Notre Dame, that is the building that houses the administration of the school division, the superintendent, the treasurer, etc. No exemption has ever been sought for that building, because that building does not fall within the definition of school building, which I've shown you. But on that same site, you've got what I'm going to call the main school, and then at the very back of the site, the south end of the site, which is Wellington Avenue, you've got 1075 Wellington. 1075 Wellington used to be a school, Prince Charles School, I believe it was called. It is now the resource center for the school division. So counselors in the form of psychologists, occupational therapists, guidance, library resources, all of that stuff is in that building, because the school divisions have chosen to centralize those services. 150 Moray, which is one of the 4 decisions here, is the same type of building. It's on a campus at Portage and Moray, where you've got the administration building for the school division, fronting on Portage, no exemption sought, but you've got an adjacent building, 150 Moray, exemption sought there. So that, sometimes you have adjacent buildings that are truly immediately adjacent, and sometimes they're separated. But the answer, Mr. Therrien, to your question, indirect, I'll acknowledge, is that if you come back to the definition of school building, which is found on page 2 of my materials, again, the Public Schools Act makes it quite clear that a school building includes buildings used for the imparting of instruction, but it goes further. or for offices or other public school purposes. And in the latter half of that definition, there's an exclusion, but it does not include a building constructed, designed, or used solely or chiefly for administrative functions of the school division. And that's why I say to you, 1180 Notre Dame, Winnipeg School Division, nobody's ever sought an exemption on that, because that building is used solely or chiefly for the administrative functions of the school division. This type of building, the resource buildings like 1075 Wellington, like 150 Moray, like 760 Kildare, they're different. So that's a long-winded, indirect answer to your question.
I've got a further question. On the savings that you've provided, the 40 savings,
Yes.
and I know they're not precedent-setting for us,
Yes.
but is there a situation in one of those that is identical to what we have today?
So I would tell you that 1395 Spruce and 1397 Spruce are almost identical in the sense that there are a variety.
Right at the back.
Yeah. Spruce, okay.
Tab 4, it's the first two decisions.
First two, yeah.
So 1395 Spruce and 1397 Spruce are very similar buildings in the sense that there's a variety of what I'm gonna call maintenance and repair type functions that go on in those buildings. There's a carpentry shop, I don't have it here, but there's photos that were presented to the panels in those cases showing all of those functions that are carried on in those buildings. So they are very similar.
That's all, Mr. Chairman, thank you.
Mr. Chairperson, in my rebuttal brief, I actually have the list that Mr. Therian is looking for, and it's a list of all the actual schools, independent trails,
You
school
have
division.
copies for
Yeah.
everybody?
Yeah, it'll be part of my rebuttal.
Okay. Mr. McIntyre's got a question?
Yep.
Just one question. If you go to page 14 of Mr. Detker's brief, it shows the schematic of the building in question. Now, my question is, are those offices related to the functions that go on in these shops?
Yes, solely for that.
Solely for this building?
I actually asked the guy, I said, is everything that you do here? He says, if it wasn't for the school, we wouldn't be here.
Okay, that's fine. No, that's my only question.
Your rebuttal?
I didn't include one for you, Mr. Newman, sorry. I'm sure you've seen it before.
I've been slighted in more ways before.
Oh, and I'm sure you know it better than I.
Okay.
So similar to Mr. Newman's brief, so I'm just going to give an overview of some recent decisions and legislation that we used to come up with the decision with regards to our position today. So real properties partial exemptions, 22(1)B is used for a public school with the means of a Public Schools Act or a public school with the meaning of the Educational Administration Act to maximize exemption of 4.047 hectares. Under the Public School Act definitions 1.1, in this act, public school means an institution for the educational purposes established and maintained under this act or under the Education Administration Act. And then once we look at the Education Administration Act, in this act it provides definitions in this act. Private school means any school other than the public school which provides a curriculum and a standard of educational equivalent that provided by the public schools, but does not include any home or place to which the clause 262B of the Public Schools Act, and similarly for the public school, means an institution of educational purposes established and maintained under this act or the Public Schools Act. 165 Henlo does not qualify under these definitions here. Moving to the next portion here, the highlighted that we have here, Part 3, 41(1)B1, is to ensure that each pupil enrolled in a school within this jurisdiction of the school board is provided with a safe and caring environment that fosters and maintains a respectful and responsible behaviors. B3, to ensure that a written policy respecting school food and nutrition is prepared for each school in the school division or the district that it is. Once again, under this criteria, 165 Hello does not apply. Page 3, the Public Schools Act, definitions. A school building in this act, school buildings include the buildings required or used in a school division or school district for the imparting of instruction for offices and other public school purposes, but does not include building or a part thereof for constructed, designed, or solely used chiefly for administrative functions of a school division or school district, other than those exercised by the principals and the teachers. None of that is happening at 165 Henlow. What we have here is then we also have some recent municipal board decisions that have taken place. Similar building, Winnipeg School Division at 1610 Selkirk Avenue. Similar situation that the request of the assessor for the application of 53.3 and end at 54.3.2 of the municipal act be allowed. That the assessment be confirmed for both classification and in terms of the municipal assessment act, and there'll be no change in the value. On that hearing, it was Mr. Newton, Ms. Anderson, and Mr. Sneesby. St. James School Division take place, 678 Moray. Similar decision taking place by Mr. Diamond, Ms. McFadden, Mr. Merritt. That the 2018 assessment be confirmed in accordance with the subsection of the Municipal Assessment Act. There'll be no changes to the realty of the assessed value. Mr. Newman was also a part of that hearing. 1180 Notre Dame, similar decision that the 2018 realty assessment be confirmed in accordance with the subsection of 54.1. There'll be no changes to the assessed value. 1075 Wellington, similar circumstances take place. 760 Kildare, that the 2018 assessment value be confirmed in accordance with the subsection 54.1, and therefore no changes in the realty value. That the classification be confirmed, and that was the one at 760 Kildare. Mr. Merritt was on that, Mr. Diamond and Ms. McFadden. And once again, 1810 Selkirk Avenue, 2017, similar situation, that there'll be no changes with regards to the classification. And the very last page that I have is a list of all the actual schools where education and instruction is taking place within the Pembina School Division, and nowhere on that is 165 Henlow listed. Thank you.
Mr. Becker? Questions?
Actually, I'll leave it up to Mr. Newman.
No, I'll do this, I don't need to ask the question, I'll do it by way of submission.
Yeah, thank you.
And I'll do it all by way of submission. I'm good, no questions.
Town members, any questions? No.
No, I'm thinking this through here. Because the Municipal Act refers to the Public Schools Act as well, I guess. So I'm trying to tie these all in. And there's the Education Administration Act that was raised. Okay, I'll leave it at that for now.
Can we go here? Here?
Submissions?
Yes. Yes.
The onus is on us.
Okay.
So let me just make a couple of observations about the rebuttal material. You were given, or Mr. Therian, you were wondering about the Education Administration Act. And it's irrelevant to what we're doing here. The reason it's irrelevant is because the Education Administration Act covers private schools. And so if we were talking about a private school, our reference point would be the Education Administration Act. But because we're not talking about a private school, we don't need to concern ourselves with it. So that's the first observation I'll make to you. In Mr. Froelich's rebuttal material, he gives you on the second page of that material, section 41.1 of the Public Schools Act, and he highlights certain of the duties of school boards, and I think it's fair to say that school boards have a legislated responsibility to ensure that a proper education is provided, and as part of that process, to ensure that budgets are created which allow the provision of the appropriate buildings and equipment and personnel in order to achieve the objectives of the public school system as our society now demands them to be. And so I say about all of that simply, in order to achieve those objectives, which school divisions have the responsibility to achieve, you need a physical infrastructure in order to do that. If we had a school building that on the back of it had 2,000 square feet that was a workshop, the Tech Voc had a 2,000 square foot janitorial room, I'm gonna call it, in which there was a workshop where the custodial staff of the building stored their tools, stored their equipment, stored the tools in order to do plumbing repairs, in order to fix a desk, re-drill a hole to put a blackboard up, all of those kinds of things. Would anybody say that that use of the property should not fall within the exemption that the school is entitled to? I suggest to you, no one would ever say that. What's happened now, and when we all went to public school, Mr. Froelich's a lot younger than the rest of us, but when we all went to public school, I think we all know that there was a custodian's room in every school, sometimes in the basement. It was a bit of a workshop. They had tools, they had their cleaning equipment. All the things that were done were in that room. Well, things have gotten a lot more complex since the day of the one-room schoolhouse. And so, of course, now you have, for purposes of efficiency, the school divisions have centralized these services into standalone buildings. But it's no different than it was before, when it was that room attached to Tech Voc or the custodial room in each school. It's necessary to enable the school to operate. The schools can't operate without these services, without this support, and it's part of the duties that school boards have in terms of the public education system. And then finally, Mr. Froelich has attached a variety of decisions, and it is interesting, of course, that we go back to 2017 on some of them, and we see that boards made up of, there's from September 7 of 17, I must have had a bad hair day that day, but on September 7 of 17, things didn't go well for my side of the table, and a panel made up of, among others, Merritt and McFadden denied exemptions, and on October 13, a panel made up of, among others, Merritt and Laurendeau denied exemption requests, and yet in January and February of 2018, panels made up of those same people allowed exemptions. What happened? How come? Well, maybe I got better with the passage of time. Practice made perfect. My presentation became more persuasive. Panel members listened, and in January and February of 2018, decisions were made that decided these properties should be exempt. I don't know for sure what happened. I can only surmise. But I simply say to you that never mind about those decisions. They're old. The ones I gave you are newer. But more than that, put all of that aside. As you noted, Mr. Therrien, this is a de novo hearing. This is a fresh hearing. Listen to the logic of what I'm saying to you. Listen to what I've said to you about the definition of school building. Listen to what I've said to you about the French version of the legislation, equally authoritative. Listen to what I've said to you about the common sense and logic of not having money run around the table, and the school division, which is its own taxing authority, being able to push these taxes through, make the system simpler, and grant the exemptions. And thank you for listening to me, and Mr. Becker.
I thank you. Where are we going now?
Him.
I think, yeah,
I'm a little lost.
no problem.
Okay.
And it's sort of funny, in terms of what we're looking at it and looking at the entire picture, the bottom line of this is all from Joe taxpayer, where this $1 is coming about. If there's an exemption or if there's not exemption, at the end of the day, Mr. and Mrs. Joe taxpayer will end up paying for the decisions that take place here. So with regards to legislation, there have been decisions on both sides of it. There's merits in Mr. Newman's argument today, but there's a reason why this will be at higher level courts. It's going to be at the higher level court in 2016. And as Mr. Newman had clearly stated already, is that he's in consultation with our legal services department to discuss the direction of what's going to be taking place or to establish precedent at a higher level court. Thank you for your time.
Okay.
Can I ask a
Yep.
question, Mr. Newman?
Yep.
What, it's just interested, Education Administration Act, you said doesn't apply, but then they define private school and they define public school. So,
Yeah,
so why are you saying it doesn't apply?
I'll show you why. So go to the first page.
Well, I
of
don't
Mr.
wanna.
No, but I
stress
want to
this out.
explain to you why.
Okay,
So, the first page, section 22(1) creates the exemption,
yeah,
and it says, used for a public school within the meaning of the Public Schools Act. And that's actually where we can stop reading, because the next section, or a private school within the meaning of the Education Administration Act. And because we're not talking about a private school, the Education Administration Act is irrelevant in this context.
I understand. Thank you.
Can we have, so in terms of valuation, because I actually created a brief as well.
Yes.
But because I don't know which is the best way for us to review that, because it will be going to the municipal board, because in my brief that I presented here, classification and value was both applied in there.
But you have a higher value than Mr. Becker,
Yep.
so
We
I-
have to hear it.
we have to hear.
I know, that's what I'm
Okay.
saying.
Can we take
Yes,
Pause.
let's just take about 5 minutes.
Thank you all.
Thank you.
Nice
Thank
to
you.
see you, Mr. McIntyre.
Nice to see you again.
Older is gonna be worse.
Okay.
80 degrees.
We'll call the meeting back to order.
Oh, I know.
And we're, Mr. Follick, I think you're going to be presenting the subject property, which is 165.
That's correct.
Whenever you're ready.
Okay. File number 18545, roll number 03065155700. For 2019, we have assessed value of $2,735,000. One building, one story. Build was in 1989. We have it zoned as M2. We have a land area of 146,036. We have a leasable area of 16,540. And I'm asking you for it to be, to confirm the assessed value based on classification liability pending the 2016 appeal. Page 2 shows the application that have taken place for the municipal board appeal that have taken place. There is the issue of assessed value and classification. Page 4 shows the decision that had taken place in 2017. Page 6 shows that the owner has been compliant with regards to filling out the income expense mailer information. And it's just a summary on the one page. Page 7 shows the office building portion of it. Page 8 shows the overhead shots of the building and the land area where it exists. And page 9 shows where we have made an error in our valuation for this property. This property is a vehicle service. We have it listed as a vehicle service garage. In Mr. Becker's presentation, there is a warehouse component or a workshop component of it. Usually workshop components and warehouse components are valued differently. So this is what we have here for the valuation. We have leasable area of 10,640 square feet at $12.82, coming up with a potential rent of $136,405. Using 4% vacancy, expenses and shortfall, we come up with a net operating of $119,868. There's a 7% capitalization rate. And there's actually additional building value of $26,000 for this, which comes up with a value of $1,738,000. Page 10 shows the vehicle service garage comparables. For the office portion of it, we have 5,900 square feet at $1,326. Coming up with, using a 7% vacancy, we have effective gross income of $72,758. 7% for expenses, $7 for shortfall, coming up with a net operating income of $64,774. Using a 6.5% cap rate, we have a value of $997,000. What I have on the bottom here on page 11 is just a list of OFS comparables that are similar to the subject property. You know, there's a range from $8.50 to $19.96. So our market rent of $13.26 for the 5,900 square feet seems to be quite fair. Page 12 shows just $97,000 worth of permits taken out in recent time with regards to the construction of office space, different interior renovations, the storage shed that they had created, which is where that $26,000 of additional building space was. And subsequently, the occupancy permit for the storage shed. Here's the income valuation of it with regards to the ESG and OFS. This is our value of $2,735,000. Cap rates on page 14. And that concludes my formal presentation for this property. I'm open to questions, but be mindful of the fact that I do realize how we have it valued as a vehicle service garage is not really reflective of the condition of this building. It's just, Mr. Becker and I talked about this ahead of time, and I told him, Doug, because it's going to the municipal board in 16, I wasn't gonna make any reductions today because there is the municipal board pending, and at that time, the adjustments will be made. So there was no changes to my brief or anything like that.
Mr. Becker, questions?
Just a couple. The 16 municipal board decision on value will have no effect on this current appeal, will it?
No, it will not, but it will set a precedent with regards to classification liability.
But if the owner's unsuccessful at getting this liability issue, then Quantum is definitely still in contention, correct?
It is, yes.
Okay, so I guess a couple of questions. I understand where you're coming from, but on page 9 where it does say vehicle service garage?
Yep,
So your rents would be different if it was just classified as a warehouse?
it would be, yes,
Lower?
yes.
Your capitalization rate, would it be the same or higher?
I think if I look at our list here right now, for the vehicle service garage, for industrial, because it's a combination of properties, right? Because we have two income streams, so the office portion's between 6 and 7%, and industrial's between 7 and 7.5. So, you know, it is a nicer building, so maybe the 7% would remain consistent on that. The rent would change, but the cap rate would probably stay the same.
I'm not sure what you mean by nicer building.
Well, it's, the building's, I'm assuming that the building's in fair shape, it's a decent building, so it's not a horrific building, so.
No, it's not horrific.
Yeah.
The office space is actually very poor.
Yeah, so, I haven't been in there, and that's why with the municipal board, I'm sure inspections will take place.
All right, that's all the questions I have.
I thank you. Mr. Therian?
Yeah, I think we have to be careful here. Our job is to decide quantum at this hearing. We can't be swung by municipal board decisions coming. In other words, our job is to get evidence here as to what makes sense on this appeal.
Yep.
Now, you're making the comment that that's where I'm a little troubled how to deal with this thing. You said that if it wasn't a vehicle service garage, the rent would be lower. We don't know how much, but you seem to be going in that direction. And the cap rate would be 7 on both. So I don't know what the appellant is saying, I haven't looked at his brief. But I think you have to appreciate, we've got to make a decision based on what we hear here. And I don't know, Mr. Chairman, but I'm looking for evidence from the city
Yeah.
to
And
justify, because you've got this here, but you're saying, well, I don't think it's quite that. Am I fair in saying that?
Well, the point is that after I received Mr. Becker's brief, I had done my own personal research, and then I realized it was a storage warehouse. So I wasn't gonna create a new valuation for that after the exchange date of 14 days. So I'm not gonna spend a lot of time discussing vehicle service garages when it's evident by Mr. Becker's presentation and what I see that it is a warehouse used to facilitate.
I think you state for the record what your position is. It'll be left up to the panel to decide what we want to do. Okay?
Exactly.
But we, I think I'm of the view that Mr. Therian brought up, and it's an awkward situation for us.
Well,
And for you, but more or less us too, because we have a value that you've determined, and you're basically saying that, well, it's incorrect.
It's not relevant.
Yes.
It is
Yeah.
not relevant,
Yeah.
but the point is.
But it's not correct either,
Yeah.
okay?
Yep.
So, and you're gonna have the other side talk about what their value is.
Yep.
So it's so.
I
you know
realize
what?
you're in limbo, and
yes,
you realize
yes,
that I'm in
yes,
limbo.
Yes, yes.
And you
So-
also and so-
we'll just deal with the facts that we have, and we'll make our decision.
Which is
that
why
way.
I've been upfront and honest
That's
with the
right.
process
Yeah.
here. I haven't advocated one position or another. With regards to the office component, I'm
Yeah.
comfortable with the rent that we have
Yeah.
here.
Yeah.
But
You do the best you can with what you have.
that's
Okay,
correct.
so Just, I think we're into questions, Mr. Therian.
Yes,
you
that
want-
was it.
That was it?
Well, he's,
Okay,
I think he's confirmed where I was at.
Yes.
I don't know about my
yes,
colleague here.
yes. Mr. McIntyre?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So you've confirmed that in your opinion, it's a warehouse, this part of the building?
All evidence, without doing an inspection of it, all evidence indicates that it is a warehouse and it's not a vehicle service garage.
And in your opinion, what would be the rent for a facility like this?
Usually warehouse rents, well, where industrial warehouses are my specialty. But, for example, I would think Mr. Becker has used $8. I don't think $8 is unreasonable for that portion of it, but I would have to double check what Mr. Becker had used.
No, I use $6.50.
$6.50, okay. But the point is, I think $8 is not unreasonable for a rent of this, because it is a combination of it. And bear in mind here, there is some vehicle services aspect of it in this building, because if you look at Mr. Becker's brief here, there's a transportation shop. So my guess is, even though it's a small portion.
Well, we haven't got to his brief, so
Yeah.
don't refer to it.
Okay.
Just talk about yours.
Yeah,
Yep.
because we haven't looked at it.
Fair enough.
Yeah.
But you asked the question.
Yeah.
He used $6.50.
Yeah.
I'm coming up with $8.
Yeah.
Our VSG is $12. There's a component of it which is a VSG. So that's why I think the $8 is a fair rent.
Okay.
Just a further clarification, is the $8 applied to both premises? Because you got the office as well.
No, the office is $13.26.
Okay, that's, you're sticking to that.
That is, yeah, because I feel comfortable with that value.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you.
Mr. Becker, the floor is yours.
Okay, if I could just, I won't go through the description, et cetera, we've already done that. So I'll go to page 7, if I can ask the board to turn to page 7. I've done it in 2 income streams, the same as Mr. Furley. And on page 7, I start with the office portion. Now, the office portion of the subject has been valued by the Assessment and Taxation Department with an April 1/16 market rent of $13.26 per square foot to the 5,900 square feet of leasable area. And remember, this is 2 stories too. So the $13.26 has been applied to the main floor and to the second floor. The subject property was owner occupied as of April 1st, 2016, therefore market research for comparable rents was undertaken, and the following comparisons were found. The first one, number 1, it's the same age as the subject, similar in size. It's on Wellington Avenue, close to the airport. It's standard office height of 10 feet. It has a August 1st, 2015 lease for $12.50 a square foot, and that was from August 15th to 2020 for 4,364 square feet. The next 2 comparisons are close to the subject property. They're on Scurfield Boulevard. That building was built in 2000. The first one is 4,843 square feet. It's a January 15 lease for $979. It has a wall height of 17 feet. The next one on Scurfield is 5,369 square feet. It's an older lease, it's from 2013, and it's $11.50 per square foot for 5,369 square feet. Based on those comparisons, I feel with the subject property, usually the second floor will get less on this type of property, but I would try and apply a rent of $12 per square foot to the total square footage. For vacancy, I'm using the assessor's 7%. Shortfall, I'm using the $7 provided by the assessment department. Now, the next difference is the capitalization rate. The city assessment and taxation department is using a 6.5 capitalization rate for the office portion of the subject property. The assessor's cap rate for the 2016 assessment based on April 1, 2014 was 7.25. We are unaware of any data that supports a 0.75% drop in the suburban cap rates and are using 7% for our valuation. Another point to look at is the capitalization rates that the assessor came up with for suburban office buildings were suburban office buildings. They weren't a portion of a property that's suburban and a portion of the property being warehouse. They weren't sales of combined areas like combined uses like the subject property. Usually suburban offices are suburban offices, similar to like there's one on Waverly and McGilvery close to the subject where Xerox is and Canvas Acre, etc. So we feel that a capitalization rate of 7% is fair for the office portion. Now, for the vehicle service garage, if I could ask the board to turn to the rebuttal, since it's already been entered, just to have a look at a typical vehicle service garage. And these were ones that were used in Mr. Froelic's presentation for his comparable rents. So on page 3, the first one there is the Fountain Tire, located on Vermilion, and this is part of a larger shopping center on Vermilion and close to Lakewood. The next one below it is, it's an auto pack, the Manitoba Public Insurance Claim Center on Main Street. And that one there, his presentation stated that the lease was for 24,255 square feet. But if you look at page 4, it's actually been assessed at 44,000 square feet. The next one on page 6, this is other comparisons, one's a Cal Tire and then a Fountain Tire. The next page is on McPhillips, and that's an auto park with the Perkins in the front. And the last one's another Cal Tire. So those are typical vehicle service garages. If you look on that same rebuttal brief and you look on the last page, page 10, you'll see what the transportation shop in the subject property looks like. It's just an open room with a portable lift. There's no pits or anything else in the thing. It's not what you call a and that's why I think the $8 because we didn't do any research on it, is high, and I'd like the board to look at the comparisons that I have on page 8. The table in the middle there, these are all warehouse buildings built in the 80s, and they range in size from 8,106,000 square feet, 8,106,000 square feet to 10,600 square feet. The leases are from October 1st, 2014, starting and December to December 1st of 15, and the rents range from $5.25 to $6.15 per square foot. They have 17 to 24 foot heights, and they're all zoned M2 and M1 lands for the subject property. So based on those comparisons of warehouses, I've used a rent of $6.50 per square foot, which is higher than any of the ones shown in the above table. For the balance of the property, I've used the 4% vacancy allowance used for warehousing. I've used $3.60 per square foot, 5 and 2 for management and other, and I'm not disputing the assessor's capitalization rate of 7%. So if you look on the bottom of page 9 or in the middle of page 9, there's kind of a summary of the valuations. For the office portion, using $12 rent and the 7% cap rate, I'm coming up with a value of $833,485. And for the warehouse, or as it was classified as a vehicle service garage, I'm using $650 for the rent, 7% cap rate, at a value of $886,198. And the last page there, what I'm stating is that for the current yearly assessment's $2,735,000, but based on my analysis, I feel that a rounded value of the subject property would be $1,720,000. And I'm open for questions.
Thank you. Mr. Pollock?
Is there an elevator in the building?
Pardon me?
Is there an elevator in the building?
No.
No elevator for the second floor office space?
No, no, it's stairs.
Okay. And do you have any, your list of rents are pretty small for the OFS comparables listed on page 7. Is there a more extensive list, or did you have not any access to any other rents in the neighborhood?
I'm sure I could, but there's not a lot of OFSs in that area, on Scurfield in that area, and on Henlow.
Okay, well,
Henlow's mainly warehousing and industrial buildings.
yeah, but there's a lot of offices in strip malls, and like, we look at my comparables that I presented. I didn't have any troubles finding stuff that were in the area, so that's why I was wondering why your list was so small.
Well, I don't know, I guess these are the best I thought to compare to the
Okay.
second, age-wise and size-wise. And again, if you look at your comparisons, they're all main floor rents, which normally are higher than a second floor rent on this type of property.
No other questions?
Thank you. Mr. Therian?
I'm just looking at your comparables on page 8. this, the subject is a 1989 building. The others, the ones you have are 84, 80, 81. In other words, they're a bit older. Is there one that stands out that would be, because we're looking at 10,640 square feet. So you're in that range, but which one would be maybe the best comparable? Would you be able to say?
Well, I guess it would probably be the one on Debates.
Mhm.
It's the newest, the closest in age, it's 1988, and it's close to, well, and it's 9,888 square feet, and it was 550. And it had a bit better ceiling height, but it's a March 15 lease. The newest lease I had was in December of 15, and that was for 615.
And so, how did you manage to bump up your rent by $1 if your comparables are around the 550 mark?
I just thought, it's a 1989 building, it's newer. It had good land to building ratio. I just thought 650 based on the age, and I inspected the site, it's in decent condition.
You inspected the site.
Yes,
What about the comparables? Have you seen any of those?
you know, from the outside,
No.
yeah, and I couldn't put the addresses because they haven't been made public, so our practice is not to show them if they're.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. Mr. McIntyre?
No questions, Mr. Chairman.
I don't have any either, so either party wants summation?
No, we're good.
No, thank you.
Record? Okay. We'll go to,
Can I just have like a 2-minute recess with Mr. Becker, or 1 minute? You
Sure.
have to shut it off.
Sure.
Yeah.
Yep.
Okay.
Okay.
Okay. So, probably don't go fast the other day. There's a couple of 54 ones in there.
Yes.
I think so.
The
And there's
next-
a rec.
The next two, and then there's a rec.
Yeah.
Okay, we'll go to Robin Boulevard, 6600.
That one was just asking.
What about 5525 Dale?
Sorry about that. Yeah.
If I could just speak to this one, 525 Dale is the Park West Hotel,
Yeah.
and 6600 Roblin is their beer store on the corner of Dale and Roblin.
Okay.
And there's been some permits, et cetera, taken out, so at this point, we're just asking for 50/100 on both properties.
Okay. Okay, on both properties.
Yes, that's
Okay.
525 and
Yep.
6600.
So then we'll go to,
25 Dale?
yeah,
And
so then we'll go to Lorette. And there, Mr. Frolick, there's a recommendation on there.
That is correct.
So take us through this and we'll see whether Mr. Becker is going to accept it.
Yeah. File number is 18526, roll number is 12-0151-90700. We have an assessed value of $287,000. The building that we're looking at is a vehicle service garage, originally built in 1928 with effective year of 1955. Wall height is 14 feet, it's zoned as C2. We have a land area of 6909. We have a leasable area of 2,268. Land to building ratio is 3.05. And when I looked at the assessed value, I felt it was too high. And I want to make a recommendation to cut it to $247,000.
Okay. Mr. Becker, in agreement?
No, sorry, sir.
Okay. You may proceed, Mr. Frolick.
Moving forward, the owner has been compliant with regards to completing out income and expense mailers. It is an owner-occupied property. As you could tell by the outside of the building, it doesn't look like, even with the effective age of being 1955, it doesn't look like a 1955 building, but it, on the outside it looks reasonable. The appeal of this property, where it's located at, it's in between Pembina on Lorette, in between Confusion Corner and Grant. And you can see on the bottom of page 3 where it's located at. I think long-term, and I don't know why it hasn't been adjusted, but for this building, I think at some point, we're gonna have to make this into one roll number, because you look at 618 and 614, majority portion of the 618 buildings are the 614 lot. And that's something that needs to be addressed, because it makes for the valuation to be unique. This was what my recommendation was based on 614 Lorette. It was using a rent of $7.83. 4% vacancy, expenses of $450, management is 7%, with a net operating income of $15,446, and a capitalization rate of 6.25. What we've noticed is that there are a lot of vehicle service garages that are near Pembina Highway, and the value of land is actually quite high. And it's a very desirable location for vehicle service garages, because everyone who lives in the south part of Winnipeg, they drop off their car and it's a short commute to downtown Winnipeg. So what I've done here is I'm using $7.83, but similar vehicle service garages in the neighborhood, you know.
Excuse me, what page
Where's
is
page
that?
5?
We have a different number than you.
Yeah, we don't have that.
706,
We have 706 as the rent.
For,
and a final value of 222.
Page
Yeah.
4,
Okay.
you've got
You
706.
probably didn't include the 247,000,
The,
because we have 222.
the number you have on 4 is closer. to our value.
Maybe you wanna go down.
Did you follow page 4?
I see page 4 is 247.
No, we
222.
don't have 247.
We
Oh,
don't
really?
have
No,
247.
no.
And what do I have there?
So you have
222.
222.
The rent sticker.
Yeah,
So what figures are you changing? And then we'll change ours.
yeah, my recommendation was for 247, because
Yeah.
initially what had happened is this property was valued on land at the 287,
Land value,
the land value of the 287. So there wasn't an income portion of it.
okay,
So what happened is that it was valued at land.
okay. But okay, tell us how you got to the 247.
Yeah.
And we'll just change our figures.
Okay, yeah, so it's 783 is the rent,
Okay, it's 2268
Okay,
square feet.
just-
2268 is the square footage.
Give us the NOI. Okay,
NOI is 15,446,
446. And cap?
6 1/4.
Okay. Okay, we can, just tell us what the rent is at the top figure there for the gross.
783.
783?
Yeah.
Okay, we can figure out the rest, I think. Everything else, 4% vacancy,
Yeah. 4%, 450
7%.
shortfall.
Yeah, okay, that's good enough. So you got the 247, okay?
Yep.
Okay, I'm sorry to
No problem.
proceed.
Okay. So, who knows what happened there? I apologize for that. So what I don't have it listed here, so it would be page 8, right after the cap rate study. So this is what I'm referencing. So this just shows how this property is shared with the subject property on 614 and 618. The property owner for this owns various businesses on this strip of land. And so there's a lot of usage with regards to building space for vehicles, because they're all intertwined together. And so because they're intertwined, so I'm sure that on many occasions, property that's being worked on at 614 is also being stored at 618, which is why long-term, I think that the part needs to be allocated for this property, because the owner's the same. There's also parking on the street, there's no limitations for parking on Lorette. So when it comes to the next page here, which I'm showing at 550 over here, the property owner also owns 614 Lorette. And what happened in the past, that was just this partial here, that was all just being used as for parking at one point. But the owner in question built a brand new vehicle service garage facility. So in his mind, he had enough storage space to store his cars, because if parking was an issue for these buildings, he wouldn't have built such a large building here. So that's at 614, so he owns 614, 618, and then he also owns the 624. What I have here is the 2018 appeal that had taken place on 618 Lorette. And there was no adjustments being made for parking on the 618 appeal that had taken place. So what ended up happening is that there's a negative adjustment for lack of parking available, but because they're essentially one economic unit and they're one business, I believe adjustment shouldn't be made for this property because the owners essentially owns the block on the Lorette. So there are no negative adjustments. And what I'm referencing to here is at the back of on the 2018 appeal on 618 Lorette, there's no adjustments required for land because the owner built this brand new building, so if parking was an issue and land was an issue for the property owner, he wouldn't have built such a large building at 624 Lorette. That concludes my formal presentation for this property.
Thank you. Mr. Becker, question?
Page 4, okay, so the rent you're using is 783.
That's correct.
Where does 6.25 cap rate come from? Mr. Smith was here earlier,
Yep.
and he had a vehicle service garage that was newer, larger, more land to building, and it had a 7%, and you thought that was fair.
Location. All the rents for this, because it's by Pembina Highway, it's Confusion Corner. There's a huge demand, and if you look at the comparables that I show on page 5, when we're looking at market valuation, we're looking at everything. We're looking at the rents, we're looking at the cap rate. So my market rent of 783 is actually quite low to my comparables that are in the neighborhood, which is why a lower cap rate is justified. And also because the square footage here is actually very small, which also allows a lot of buyers who are interested in purchasing it to use that.
So there's less risk in this one because it has no land, and it's right beside a main
And
rail line.
and it's in a great location.
A great location.
It's right off Pembina Highway.
There's no parking.
There's parking on the street and it's one economic unit.
Parking
Because
on the
it's
street.
There is parking on the street. And the point is, there would be significant amount of parking if the building on right beside it at 618 wasn't overstepping its boundaries. Because if you take away that building that's on 618 Lorette, there'd be a significant amount of parking there. Would there not be?
No.
Because you're looking at 2,000,
You're aware of, that there's all kinds of new restrictions in place regarding backing onto a railway and the easements, et cetera, that you have to have before you could build? Like, do you actually think that they could build on that lot nowadays if they ripped that down?
I'm actually looking at what it's at, the condition right now of the rent.
Okay, so it's a
So what it is.
1928 building originally. It has no land to building. It says a variant age of 1950, I
Well,
think you have on it.
You
And
can't
you're
really say it's
using
no
it-
bound to building because there would be a significant amount of the building here
But there isn't, is there?
if it's combined with 614 and 618. It would be significant.
But, okay, so what cap rate did you use on 618? Was it 7% or 8%?
618, it is a larger building though, so the cap rate would be higher on the building first.
Because they're,
Would it not be?
you're
Because
saying
of-
it's less risk having a bigger building that's easier to rent and easier
No,
to
it's
sell?
more risk. There's more risk on a bigger building.
So why would the cap rate be higher? If the cap rate's higher, that usually means there's less risk.
If the cap rate's higher, that's more risk, yes. More availability with buyers who can afford to buy it.
Wow.
Look at it this way. When it comes to purchasing a home, there are more buyers for a home that's worth $250,000 than there is for a person who could afford to buy a $750,000 home.
Okay, but you've applied a 6.25 cap to a building that you valued on land because you didn't think there was any value there.
That was an error that we had made as a department, yes.
Okay, your comparisons that you talked about that are in the area, and they're great comparisons.
Yep.
The only one you have in the area is 370 Daily, is that in the area?
Well, Chevrier is in Fort Garry.
But, that's,
Pembina Highway is on Fort Garry.
but it's not
And that's
close
literally
to,
right across the street, 340 Pembina Highway.
Gentlemen, restricted to questions and answers, okay?
I'm just asking you a question,
Yeah.
is Daly Street close to the subject property?
Yes, it is.
Is it a 2010 lease?
This is a 2000, yeah, the lease is 2000.
484 St. Mary's, is that close to Confusion Corner?
484 St. Mary's? No,
No, okay, is 1322 Chevrier close to Confusion Corner?
it's in Fort Garry.
Is it close to Confusion Corner?
It's in Fort Garry, and that's when we look at
Okay.
it. No, it's
The
not,
reason
no,
I'm
it's not,
asking-
no.
okay, because you mentioned that as a highlight of where this
Okay.
property was located.
Comparable 5 is close to Confusion Corner. Comparable 7 is close to Confusion Corner. Comparable 5 has a market rent of 1973. Comparable 7 has a market rent of 1328.
And these are old leases, do you know if they're part of a bigger shopping center or anything?
Well, 340 is a 5-year lease, and comparable 5 is 2013 lease, and it's at 10 years. So there's lots of economic activity in the neighborhood. That's why it's a great place for a vehicle service garage.
Okay, so
Which is
where
why
would
that the owner expanded and built a brand new building here, because it was a desirable location.
But it's not, he didn't build it on 614, did he?
But it's one economic, they're all connected together, and they're all interchangeable.
But he could sell this one individually, right?
You could,
Yeah, it's assessed individually.
yes.
That's all the questions I have.
Thank you. Mr. Therrien?
For an observation on page 3, I guess the picture shows pretty narrow doors. Must be a good driver, especially getting in as well. Pretty narrow door.
I think what happens
Yeah.
is I fit that in so it'd be one take. I'm quite confident that the doors are larger than that.
I thought I would, I figure it's a good driver to come in there.
Yeah, I don't think even if you're the best, if you're Mario Andretti, I don't think you can fit that in.
Okay, that's,
Mr. McIntyre?
I have another observation question. Page 8, Mr. Mayor,
Yeah.
Mr. Foote. When I look at the outline of the legal description of this 614,
Yeah,
it includes a portion of 618.
yeah.
So if he was to sell 614, part of that 618 would also be part of the sale, would it not?
That's why we have to be replotted. That's why it has to be replotted. Because it's one economic unit.
Well, it's
Because you can
both
sell
of
it.
them together.
Yeah, so there'll be a replot combining 618 and 614 moving forward.
Would you think he couldn't sell it even now? I mean, somebody would get half the building.
I'm not a lawyer to comment on that.
No further questions?
Thank you. Mr. Becker, the floor is yours.
Okay, if I could ask the board, the revised rent of Mr. Frolks is actually lower than what I've suggested. I've suggested a rent of $8. And if you actually turn to page 2, it does show that the doors are, they're not large. Because if you
no,
look at
they're
the truck-
larger.
But they're a little bit larger on my picture. But if you look at the truck in front of the doorway there, they're not wide doors. But if I could ask the board to turn to page 3, I'm just gonna go through it just quickly through this. Subject property located was built in 1928 and has a leasable area of 2,268 square feet with 14-foot wall height and a variant age of 1955. The site for 614 Lorette Avenue is regular shape with a total site size according to the City of Winnipeg assessment department of 6,909 square feet and is zone C2. However, a significant portion of the structure assessed at 618 Avenue lies on these lands. Page 4, property located at 618 Lorette is a metal frame building originally constructed in 1988 with a reported plan area of 5,794 square feet and a mezzanine area of approximately 496 square feet, giving a total gross floor area reported as 6,290 square feet. The building is shown as having 18-foot wall height. The subject site for 618 Lorette Avenue is rectangular in shape with a total site size, according to the City of Winnipeg Assessment Department, of approximately 5,422 square feet. So it doesn't even have a one-to-one land-to-building relationship. A small parcel of land at 0 Daly, and I've got you can see the highlighted there, it's on the corner, just kitty corner, Daly and Lorette, is used by 614 and 618 for parking. The site is irregular in shape with a reported size of 1,883 square feet and a 2018 value of 58,000. 58,000 assessed value will be apportioned equally, and a deduction of 29,000 will be made from the indicated assessment of 614 Lorette. Mr. Merrick has shown that it wasn't taken off of 618, but that wasn't my evaluation. I'm saying that 614 would require at least half of that lot to park the vehicles. Now, if I could get the board to turn to page 6. Page 6 had my comparisons, and I've got pictures of all of them. I got pictures of all of them if the board wants to look at them, but as I mentioned, the rent that I'm using is $8 and the assessor's recommended $7.83. Vacancy, we're using the assessor's vacancy of 4%, shortfall of $450, and 7% for unrecovered expenses and management. Page 7, capitalization rate. Property's been assessed with a cap rate of 6.25 for 2019. For the 2016 assessment, the Board of Revision reduced the 2016 assessment based on an adjusted NOI and an 8% cap rate. We are unaware of any cap rates that have dropped by 1.75% from April 2014 to April 2016. Other factors as location, land site, and configuration, and the fact that there is another building on the site that is assessed under a different rule number would increase the cap rate for the subject property. Therefore, for our valuation, we would be using a cap rate of 7.5%. Once we take our net operating income of $15,077.91, capitalize it at 7.5%, we come up with an income value of $210,543. We remove a portion of the parking lot on Daily, we end up with a total value of $182,000 rounded. I'll just quickly go through the addenda. These are my comparisons that I used to come up with mine. And one of them is at 484 St. Mary. And on that one there, I think Mr. Frolick stated a rent of 484 St. Mary. He stated a rent of $750 over 5 years, and I've used that as well in my comparison. It's similar size. It is a better land to building ratio, but it does have problems with the riverbank. Next one's on Henry, next one's on Stadacona, next one's on Narren. And then page 15 and 16, this is the 2016 Board revision, where it says they adjusted the net operating income and a capitalization rate of 8%. So, based on my presentation, I am open for questions.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Frolick?
Are you familiar with Winter's Auto Body on 1010 Arlington?
Yes, I got my car fixed there once.
Okay, no problem. And you know what the land to building ratio is there for that auto body shop?
No idea.
The actual auto body shop's 21,000 square feet, and it has a very low building to land ratio. And so it's not necessary to have, when you have large areas, is it necessary to have large land areas if you have large building areas to store vehicles?
Most of the vehicle service garages, even if we could look back to the ones that you used as comparisons for the previous appeal on Pendle, have decent land to building.
Yeah, but it's,
If you're gonna be busy, you have to have a place to park the cars.
yeah, but
If
if
you
you
said
have,
people drop them off, leave them there and then pick them up after work, but there has to be a place to put those cars.
yeah, but obviously he had a lot of access to a lot of land, and he chose not to utilize that land for parking.
Where did he have that access?
At 624 Lorette.
624 Lorette. He
Yeah.
already built a new building?
Exactly.
But he had to build, you show a picture of 624 Lorette there with a bunch of cars parked there. They're not his cars, that's not his lot, that's rented to a U-Drive company.
Yeah. But
So that's
he has
not
a-
his, he doesn't have access to that.
Well, not all the cars there are listed for that. A lot of that's for his auto body shop that he uses.
No,
Where's
it's
vehicle
not. He has
service?
to park on the street.
Yeah. Is there any parking limitations on the street?
There is, that was brought up at an appeal on that one, I'm not sure what the
Well,
result.
the point is I went to the subject property and I drove by there and I didn't see any limitations for parking on Lorette. There's no 2-hour limit parking.
Who wants to buy a building where they have to rely on street parking? I mean, that just doesn't make sense. That's my answer.
Okay.
I don't know what Winters, I've been there, I know where it is, I have no idea what their land building is.
Yeah, that's quite low. And so you're asking for a value which is lower than your 2016 appeal, is that correct?
Yes,
Okay.
I know.
No other questions?
Thank you. Mr. Thering?
Could you just quickly review your reduction of 29,000 again?
Okay, if you turn to the very last couple of pages on my brief, page 18 shows the 2019 assessment for the lot on Daly.
Okay,
And the last page shows the site line and the assessment on it. So the darkened area there that has 58,000 on it, that's the lot where I'm saying is shared with 614 and 618. They park cars on that lot,
but it's a separate roll,
correct?
so wouldn't that be dealt with when you're appealing? I'm not sure I'm following properly here.
No, it's like,
Would you deal with that when that property comes up on that roll number?
no, I'm not saying that it shouldn't have that value, but what I'm saying is, if you were to buy the building at 614 and you needed additional parking, you would have, it's all one package you would get.
So you're not accepting the one economic unit argument that was raised? You're using that totally?
Totally different, they're assessed
Totally different.
separately,
Okay.
it can be bought and sold.
Yeah, and I had a last question on the last was 194, and you, was that appealed? That last December?
Nothing more of.
No. Okay, thank you, Mr. Chairman.
I thank you. Mr. McIntyre?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So just to clarify, would you have to buy that vacant land at 58,000 if you bought 614?
The owner currently owns it, so if you wanted to buy that, if you didn't buy it, you'd have trouble, you would have not enough space in my mind to park the car.
But it still can be sold separately?
It still
correct?
can be, every one of those parcels can be sold separately.
Okay, thank you. No further questions?
Just one question, I guess. By the time the city adjusted their NOI, it's a high ballgame, correct?
Pretty cool, yes, it's
Yeah.
basically a cap rate, and if you
Yeah.
want to agree with my adjustment for the
Yeah.
parking.
Okay. Final word?
No, I think it's.
Summation?
self-explanatory.
No? Okay. We'll go on to Pembina Highway, 680. So Mr. Pollock, whenever you're ready.
Yeah.
Yeah.
File number 18487, roll numbers 12-097-65-0000. 680 Pembina Highway, we have an assessed value of $3,934,000. We have it as a complete auto dealership. Effective years for the building is from between 1950 and 1979. Zoning C3. We have a land area of 67,285. We have a leasable area of 27,541. Property owner has been compliant with regards to filling out income and expense mailers. Subject properties on 680 Pembina Highway. It's just actually that's 680 is just, you know, as you can see on page 2 and page 3, where it's located at, just south of Confusion Corner. Owner has been compliant with regards to filling out income and expense mailers. It is an owner-occupied building. We have one income stream for this property. We have a storage rent of $8.39 on 4,971 square feet. And then for the two additional areas that we have for 7,150 and 15,420. Total leasable area is 27,541, and our blended rate for this property is $12.26. Using 2% vacancy lost, 7% expenses, shortfall of $550. We have a net operating income of $304,890. Using a cap rate of 7.75%, we have a value of $3,934,000. So what I've done for comparables is I've taken other properties that are similar to the subject property in terms of overall rents, whether retail component and storage component. I got the variety of rents that I have here are on Keniston, Portage Avenue, McGilverley, McPhillips, Henderson Highway. Our average rent between 2014 and 2016, $781. So our value of $12.26 is actually quite fair compared to that, because Pembina Highway is a major thoroughfare. All my comparables are major thoroughfares. So we're being realistic of the fact that there's a reduction based on the age of the building. A lot of these are a lot newer. So to have a $5 difference between the average of what I have listed for my comparables and the actual vehicle dealership that we have here seems to be quite fair. For actually some BCD portions of it, we have the Boyd Auto Group for detailing, and we've got the acquisition here. There's some dispute with regards to the Subaru dealership at 2516, but that's the information that they've given us. So overall, the 1226 market rate that we're using seems to be quite fair with regards to the retail component, a vehicle service garage component of it. And that concludes my formal presentation.
Thank you, sir. Mr. Becker, questions?
Couple of questions, yes. On page, I guess, 2 and 3 of your presentation, are you aware that there's no access to the subject property on Pembina Highway?
In terms of,
Well, vehicle access. That you have to actually go onto every street to get into the subject property?
yeah, I see that there, it's shown on page 3.
Is that typical for a car dealership?
Not
To not
usually.
have entrance, okay.
No, not usually, but considering that they're storing vehicles on there, I guess they're making a business choice not to have access to it.
Is it their choice or the city's choice, do you know?
I'm not too sure.
Okay. Your rents on, I'm not sure what page, your list of rents after page 5 and page 6.
Yep.
The top portions are all retail stores, right?
Yeah, they have a combination of, yeah.
Are most of them newer than the subject property?
Yeah, that's why there's a $5 difference in average rent.
They're older leases, most of them?
Yeah. Well, no, lease rates of 2015, reference date of 2016. I don't think they're older
Okay.
leases.
But you have from the bottom up there, like 2000.
Well, if I got 40
One,
leases
2009.
and my midway point's 13, so I think there's a nice, over half of them are less than 3 years away from the reference date, so I
Are they
think,
comparable to the subject?
are they comparable? Well, they're a higher rent than the subject property.
But are they comparable?
I would say so, because they're comparable with regards to what they use and what they store.
Does the River City Sports have an auto body in there and stuff like that?
But the Canadian Tire does. At $12.
It's, okay, at the bottom two, the Boyd Group, that's not a dealership though, it's a VSR, right?
It's a vehicle service garage, yes.
So it's not a dealership.
No, it's not.
The Montel Detailing, Winnipeg Hyundai, that one, maybe you can help me out, if I turn to the picture of it, which I guess would be page, I'm not sure what page. But it's 3680 Portage.
Okay.
That one, is it part of another lot, because there's no access to it?
Let me just find it here. Yes, it must be.
That was originally built as a Winnipeg Hyundai, right?
Yeah.
And it was built in 2001?
No.
Okay. And the Frontier Acquisition Company, the last lease you have there, the owners are actually, it's owner occupied, correct?
Yeah, but they had told us during what they had filled out in the mailer, so there was a lease back on that as well. So it is a bit. There are questions that have been raised by the applicants, but based on the information that they provided us.
All right, if I look at your last couple of pages, the fourth last page, there's a picture of that Subaru, Frontier Subaru.
Yep.
It has good land to building, there's good frontage, good access off of Pembina Highway.
Yep.
Considerably different than the subject.
Mhm.
If I look at the next page, the person that signed it works for Frontier Subaru.
Okay, yes.
So it just kind of tweaks a couple of bells that it might be owner occupied.
Yeah, but what also happens here is then on the top page of it, they also claim it as being a net lease.
Well, if you look at their next one, it ticks and it says owner occupied, the next year's.
Like I said, underneath it, it says net lease, and then it could go either way.
Okay, that's all my questions.
Thank you. Mr. Therian?
Yeah, I was looking at the comparables, it's not an easy task here. There's a vehicle dealership as normally quite a footprint, like quite a big piece of land, and you go to a Canadian, you go to a Dollar Tree or stuff like this, I mean, there's a lot of these stores that are quite different, I guess. So I was trying to look at your comparables, but you're arguing that your average is 17 less 5, which is around the 12 you're going for.
To make up for the lack of land and age.
Because when I look at your Canadian Tire and your Montail Detailing Auto Gallery, they're in the range of $12. Well, some of them anyway. Garden City's $12. Okay, anyway, that's the only question I had. The
Thank you.
comparables, I'm not too sure how to use them, so
Well,
we'll see what the appellant has to say.
Mr. McIntyre?
No questions, Mr. Chairman.
Questions? Mr. Becker, the floor is yours.
Okay, if I could ask the board to turn to page 3. The subject property is best described as an automotive dealership and service center situated on 1.5 acres, 65,340 square feet parcel land of C3 zone, land on the east side of Pembina Highway, just south of Grant. The only access to the subject property is off Ebby Avenue and has a land to building ratio of 2.37 to 1. Subject property has been constructed in stages since 1950, with the most recent addition in 2009. The breakdown is as follows. The first building in 1950 was 4,971 square feet with a 13-foot wall height. The next one was 1953, 7,150 square feet, 14-foot wall height. Next one, 1976, 6,489 square feet with a 14-foot wall height. And in 2009, 8,931 square feet with a 13-foot wall height. Now I could ask the board to turn to page 5. Under net market rent, the assessor has applied an overall net market rent of $12.27 per square foot to the entire area of 27,541 square feet. This includes the original 1950 Quonset building of 4,971 square feet. We have looked for dealership rents, and most vehicle dealerships are owner occupied. The two lease premises we found was 3081 Portage. This property was leased by First Choice Touch-Up and Dent Repair. The property, and the next one is on Waverly, and that one is currently rented and used by Knott Auto Corp. The rent for the one on 3081 Portage, it was 31,000 square feet of 31,568 square feet of leasable area. Had a November 1st, 13 lease to expiring in August 31st to 17 for $1.90. In that land area, 222,209. The next one is for Knott Auto Group. This is for 1322 Waverly, built in 1970. Leasable area is 27,603, very similar to the subject. Has a January 15 to December 17 lease of $6.55. It has a land area of 219,410 square feet. Now, Altus has also appealed and appeared before the board on several other dealerships for the 2018 and 19 cycle. The chart below lists the rents used by the City of Winnipeg Assessment and Taxation Department in the development of the April 1, 2016 market values. For St. James Volkswagen on Century, that has it's 39,344 square feet. They use $12.28 a square foot. For Birchwood Credit Solutions on Portage Avenue, now this is the one that's right by used to be the Birchwood Hotel. It's the Holiday Inn Airport West. It was first built as a Mercedes dealership, and it also has a parts source store on the site. That one there was built in 1974. Leasable area is 22,677 square feet, and it has $11 net rent on it. The land area is shared with the parts source, so I didn't put that down. The next one is River City Ford. This was 33,000 square feet, 1193, large land area. Murray Chev Olds in the Waverly Auto Mall. It's large, 66,215 square feet, 1158. Frontier Toyota on Regent, built 1981, 2010, $12.42 a square foot. For Fort Rouge Auto Body, which was built from 1950 in stages, very small land to building ratio, assessors using $12.27 per square foot. The other dealerships are all larger, have good exposure, good land to building. In fact, the one on Waverly, the Murray Chev Olds, has 306,000 square feet, and we were also able to get an adjoining parking lot of another 100 or so thousand square feet removed from the value of the assessment, and that was recommended by the assessor. The dealership, on page 6, the dealership at 2554 Portage was originally built as a Mercedes dealership, and the balance of the comparisons are major car dealerships with large open showrooms and modern service areas and facilities. The wall height on the newer dealerships range from 11 to 24 feet, and these properties are normally located on major traffic routes and have large land parcels. Based on the two charts above for the market rent, I'm using the original steel building. I'm using $9. It's the 1953 building is 7,150 square feet. I'm using $9. For the 1976 edition and the rear garage, built in 2009, I'm using $11. And for the Quonset built in 1950, I'm using $5 for an overall rent of $9.04 per square foot. The assessor has applied a vacancy allowance of only 2% to the income stream for the dealership. However, for the reasons set forth, and I must apologize, I didn't attach the vacancy study, but I do have some board orders on the back where I did attach it on those appeals, and I was able to get a 5% vacancy allowance. Shortfall, we're going with the 550, 7% for management and other. Now for the capitalization rate, the April 2016 capitalization rate applied by the city is only 7.75%, representing a compression of 75 basis points from the rate of 8.5 that was applied to the 2016 assessment. We feel that the compression of 0.75 is too high, and we're using 8%. So based on my market rents and an 8% capitalization rate, I come up with a value rounded at $2,764,000. I'd like to walk the board through the rest of my brief. On page 10, here's some photos of the subject property, exterior and interior. This is their showroom, and as you can see, it has very low ceiling height. There's not room for a lot of cars, but at the bottom of page 10, that's their showroom. Page 11, this is part of the service center and auto body. Page 12, this is the newer portion that was built in 09. This is the back. That's where they do some of the work on the cars. The bottom is a picture of the Quonset. Page 13, this is their parking area with their entrance in and out of the 2009 service garage. Top of page 14 is a picture of the outside of the Quonset building again, and at the bottom of page 14 is the inside of the Quonset building that the current rent on it is being used by the assessment department is $12.27 square foot. Page 15, this shows the assessor's work of an overall rent of $12.27. The next one below just shows a breakdown of the rents based on their business assessment. Now the next one is, page 18 is the board order for, this is St. James Volkswagen at 670 Central. And it was reduced from 5.8 to 5.3, and it said based on the applicant's evidence. And what we did on this one is we asked for a 5% vacancy and a 7.75 capitalization rate. And if you see on page 12, we got the 5% and a 7.5% capitalization rate. Now this is for a newer, built originally as a major car dealership. The next one is for 3636 Portage, this is River City Ford. On this one, we got the value reduced from $4,583,000 to $2,929,000. And on this one, again, on page 25, you'll see we were asking for 5% for the vacancy, and we were asking for a capitalization rate of 8%, and we were asking for the adjoining lot that was assessed at $1,442,000 to be reviewed from the assessment. The board went on page 27, they went with a 7.75% cap rate and reduced the value of the lot next door. The next one is for Murray Chevrolet. Now this one was from $9,200,000 to $8 million. And on this one, the assessor asked that the adjoining parking lot be removed. And we have that, plus we asked for a 5% vacancy, which was awarded. And then we have this one here for 1486 Regent, where the city had added for excess land at the rear of the property, and the board reduced the assessment by removing the excess land portion. And that's my presentation.
Thank you, sir. Mr. Pollock, questions of the?
Yeah, in terms of time, because I got a commitment, was there a certificate of agreement signed for this property in 2016?
In 2016?
Yes.
I'm not aware.
Okay. So you're not familiar with the certificate of agreement that was signed by Mr. Slaughter?
There was one signed recently.
Yeah, 2016, yeah. You know the rent that they used on that?
No.
It was $10.92. And I have it here for the boards. No other questions?
Mr. Therian?
Just, I'm not sure I was listening properly on this vacancy thing. So why are you using 5? Because of the previous rulings, or?
At the previous rulings, I had included our vacancy study, and I could have gone through that with you, where it showed that big box stores or this type of properties are not immune to going vacant. Like the one on Portage Avenue that I showed there, that is one of my comparisons for the rent, that was a major dealership at one time, went vacant, and it was bought by WRE. They wanted to turn it into apartment blocks, and they found out they couldn't because they had to redo the whole sewer system all the way back up to Sturgeon, and that made their
So it's based on your big box review?
yes, that I didn't supply.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Mr. McIntyre?
No questions, Mr. Chairman.
I just have one, I guess the greatest discrepancy is the rents. Substantial.
Yeah, right, the 1227 overall is higher than majority of the newer dealerships that rents were applied by the assessors. I couldn't find rents to justify that weren't owner occupied or the same type of property, or in the size or age and configuration.
Okay. I have no further questions. Some summary in either party?
No, we're good.
That was it?
But if I kept talking, Mr. Follicle misses.
Mr. Becker, thank you very much for your presentations and results very soon.
Yes.
Mr. Follick, you just have one thing that you can read to the record,
Yep, for sure.
okay? Thanks, Ben.
Thank you. See you again, Mr. McIntyre.
Yes, sir. Mr. Becker? When you retire.
Ex-fellow.
When you retire.
What was it?
When you retire.
It's part-time, that's all.
Thank you, Mr. Follick.
File number is 18320. Roll number is 14022926000. We have assessed value for 2019 at $348,000. And we like, it's a vehicle service garage, and we'd like for the assessment to be confirmed at 348.
Right. I think, any questions at all? No? All right. So I think you are done then, sir.
Thank you.
So thank you very kindly for your presentations.
Thank you.